Hey radicals, I hope that everybody's having an amazing weekend. Well, I think that Joe Biden must have been following the show because he saw that I was giving him way too much credit lately. If you watched my interviews with Matt Taibbi or with Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, you heard me say that I thought Joe Biden was doing a decent job in avoiding World War III. I said this, of course, because he's been pushing back on the corporate media psychopaths who have been cheerleading for World War III.
Sir, you've made it very clear in this conflict that you do not want to see World War III. But is it possible that in expressing that so early that you were too quick to rule out direct military intervention in this war? Could Putin have been emboldened knowing that you are not going to get involved directly in this conflict?
No and no.
You do not believe that?
Unfortunately, over the last couple of days, President Biden has decided to go in the complete opposite direction. I have two clips for you here, both of them where Biden says things that could be construed as the U.S. announcing acts of war against Russia. The first clip that I want to show you here is President Biden meeting with U.S. soldiers in Poland. This whole clip, honestly, is pretty incoherent. He stutters and stammers and restates things several different times. But the one thing that he seems to clearly say is that U.S. troops have been in Ukraine and will be going back there. Take a listen for yourself what Biden says here.
But the Ukrainian people have a lot of backbone. They have a lot of guts, and I'm sure you're observing it. And I don't mean just the military, which is we've been trained in since back when Russia moved into in the southeast Ukraine. But also the average citizen. Look at how they're stepping up. Look at how they're stepping up. And you're going to see when you're there, and some of you have been there, you're going to see women, young people standing in the middle of front of a damn tank, just saying, I'm not leaving. I'm holding my ground. They're incredible. But they take a lot of inspiration from us. And you know, woman who just died, the Secretary of State, used to have an expression. She said, we are the essential nation. It sounds like a bit of hyperbole, but the truth of the matter is, you are the organizing principle around which the rest of the world the free world is moving.
So again, in this clip, it's pretty obvious Biden seems to be saying that U.S. troops have been in Ukraine, which they have been. They trained in Ukraine prior to the war. And he's saying that they're going to be going back, which would be effectively an act of war against Russia, especially if U.S. troops and Russian troops met each other and started shooting at each other. After this happened, a White House spokesperson clarified to Fox News that this is not what Joe Biden meant. The spokesperson said, quote, "The president has been clear we are not sending U.S. troops to Ukraine, and there is no change in that position." So apparently this is just a gaffe where Joe Biden, again, because he was stammering the whole time and was generally unclear, apparently he just didn't mean that they would be going to Ukraine and misstated whatever he was trying to say. It is funny that the White House didn't even try to suggest what he meant when he said that. So I'm not quite sure what Biden was trying to say. Like, did he think he wasn't already in Poland and thought he was talking to troops who were going to Poland? It's not really clear where he was saying that those troops would be going.
And you're going to see when you're there, and some of you have been there, you're going to see women, young people standing in the middle of front of a damn tank.
So if that wasn't bad enough, while Joe Biden was also in Poland, he gave a big speech in Warsaw. The media hyped this. This was Joe Biden standing up to Vladimir Putin. This was supposed to be like Ronald Reagan telling Gorbachev to tear down this wall. This was Biden's big speech against Vladimir Putin and framing this whole conflict as a conflict between democracy and authoritarianism. Which, by the way, is funny because isn't it odd that after the collapse of communism, we're still feuding with the same countries, but we're just not calling it capitalism versus communism anymore. We're calling it democracy versus authoritarianism. Isn't it kind of funny how it's the exact same countries involved, but we're just kind of shifting what the story is as far as why we're feuding with each other? I've actually heard some people, in terms of Russia specifically, characterize it as Eurasianism. And this is really about liberal democracy versus Eurasianism. But anyway, during this speech, Joe Biden made a statement that Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power. which seems to be suggesting that the policy of the US government is regime change in Russia. Take a listen here to what Biden said in Warsaw.
Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia, for free people refused to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness. We will have a different future, a brighter future, rooted in democracy and principles, hope and light, of decency and dignity, of freedom and possibilities. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power. God bless you all, and may God defend our freedom, and may God protect our troops.
Now, folks, it's really hard to imagine a much more reckless statement for a U.S. president to make. And it's funny because, over the last several years, all we heard about Donald Trump is, oh, he's saying these terrible things. He's undermining the U.S.'s standing in the world. He's unhinged. He's irrational. And things that he says could risk a great conflict. Well, folks, the president of the United States saying that he wants the president of Russia removed from power, that's a pretty reckless statement. If for no other reason than the fact that the president of the U.S. and the president of Russia need to be able to speak to each other in case of any kind of false alarm or as a last-ditch attempt to avoid nuclear war. We've actually seen this in movies like Dr. Strangelove and Failsafe. Having an open line of communication between the president of the United States and the president of Russia is crucial for all life on Earth. That's not hyperbole. That's not a ridiculous statement. It's just a fact. These two men and the relationship between them is what's standing between us and total nuclear Armageddon. If the United States and Russia launch their nuclear weapons at each other, every city in North America and Europe is going to be leveled. Even if you live in a rural area, if you are near a military base or near anything of strategic military importance, you could be wiped off the face of the earth by a nuclear weapon. If you survive, you could die from the nuclear fallout. And even if you survived that, the nuclear winter that would precede would wipe out all the crops. It would create a mass extinction event where billions of animals would die. There would be no power. There would be no society. You'd be in a battle for survival against any other survivors. And you probably couldn't even really burn wood to stay warm because all of the wood would be radioactive. And again, this is something that I think that the liberal media or the elite just don't get. Like, they don't comprehend how a nuclear war between the US and Russia would be the end of everything. Like, it's not just going to be that everything in your life is different. It's not just going to be that there's no more electricity and internet and you're living in a reality that's worse than the Stone Age. It's that there's not even going to be any countries anymore. So like the propaganda that you're ingesting now is just not even going to matter because there's not going to be anything. But anyway, this is why it's important for the president of the United States to be able to talk to the president of Russia. And you can go back decades and decades well into the Cold War, actually back to the start of the Cold War, and every single president of the US has been able to talk to the leader of Russia or the Soviet Union. FDR and Truman talked to Stalin. Eisenhower and JFK talked to Khrushchev. Nixon and Carter talked to Brezhnev. Reagan talked to Gorbachev. Bush and Clinton talked to Yeltsin. Bush, Obama, Trump, and even Biden up until this point have talked to Vladimir Putin. That is a fact. These two men can decide if we all die or not. That's really what it comes down to. And the White House knows this because not only did a few weeks ago they condemn the fact that Lindsey Graham said that Vladimir Putin should be assassinated, but in fact, after Joe Biden made this statement, the White House had to again clarify that's not really what Biden meant. According to The Hill, quote, following the remarks, a White House official said that comment was referring to Putin exercising power outside of Russia. Quote, the president's point was that Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power over his neighbors or the region. He was not discussing Putin's power in Russia or regime change, the official said in an email. So again, folks, this just blows my mind that within 24 hours, the president of the United States made two monumental gaffes that could be construed as announcing war against Russia. One saying that U.S. troops are going to be entering Ukraine, and one saying that the policy of the U.S. government is regime change in Russia. This just dwarfs anything that Donald Trump ever said. Did Donald Trump ever make any kind of gaffe like that? And worse yet, it just points to the fact that Joe Biden either doesn't know what the hell he's saying, or he's just so unintelligible that it is a threat to world peace. What if he tells his generals, do launch the nukes, but he means do not launch the nukes? What if he just misspeaks and leaves out the word not? We'll all die. But the real black pill here is that even if Joe Biden was removed from office through the 25th Amendment, Kamala Harris will be president. Even if she got impeached or something, Nancy Pelosi will be president. Those really aren't any better options at all. So the fact of the matter is that we just have to resign ourselves to the fact that the government of the United States right now is run by people who are completely incompetent and completely incoherent and who are daily risking the lives of everyone on Earth.
The only way to spare more pain and more loss, the only way, these millstones no longer mark our national mourning. These milestones, I should say, no longer mark our national mourning.